We're looking at video 5, some special cases for solving one-step equations, some fractions and negatives here to cancel out. So I wanted to start by looking at just what happens when we multiply by a fraction. If I have 1/5 times 40, I could write it like this, or 1/6 of 36, right? That of tells me to multiply. I could write it like this, or 1/4 of -20. I could write it like that. So when we see a multiplication problem like this, we would cross cancel. I would look for things that cancel out on the top and the bottom. So I'm going to show it a different way. I'm going to go like this and say 5 goes into 5 once, 5 goes into 40 8 times. And now you can see multiplying across the top, I just get 8 over 1. And I'm not going to write the over 1. I'm going to show it this way. 6 goes into 6 once, 6 goes into 36 6 times. Multiply across the top, and I'm not going to bother to write over 1. Show it this way. 4 goes into 4 once, 4 goes into -20, -5 times. Multiply across the top, and I just get that -5. Okay? So I could see this as, really, I'm doing 40 divided by 5. I'm doing 36 divided by 6. I'm doing -20 divided by 4. And that will give me these answers that we came up with. Okay? So let's see if I have an x in there. Well, if I have 1/5 times x, I could write it like this. And when I multiply the top, I just get x over 5. Or 1/6 times x over 1 is just x over 6. Or 1/4 times x over 1 is just x over 4. So you can see that 1/5, I end up just dividing by 5. 1/6, I'm just doing divide by 6. 1/4, I'm just dividing by 4. Okay, so we're going to use that kind of idea here when we're solving equations that look like this. If I have 1/5 times x, we just did that. We know that's the same as saying the same as doing x divided by 5. And to cancel out divide by 5, I'm going to multiply by 5. Whatever I do on one side, I have to do on the other side. Right? These cancel out. Okay, I'm using multiplication now, the inverse of dividing, to cancel out and get the variable by itself. When I see 1/3 x, I know that's x divided by 3. And I can cancel that out multiplying by 3 on both sides. Cross out what cancels, x would be 24. And if you plug these back in, 1/3 of 24 is 8. 1/5 of 20 is 4. It works. Let's finish this one. If I have x and -1/7, I'm going to keep the negative there. It's like dividing by -7. So to cancel that out, times -7 on both sides. Well, these cancel out, and x is equal to -49. Okay, so that's one kind of problem you might see and how to isolate the variable, how to solve. How about these? What if I have a fraction times a number? Here's what we're going to do. Like we saw up here, we're dividing by that denominator each time. So write this in, divide by the denominator, and then multiply by the numerator. Okay? We could go back into multiplying fractions and work this out the long way, but I'm going to show you a shortcut. And I have lots of examples here for you to practice. I'm going to write 2/5 of, means times, 45 over 1. Okay? Now, we already know we would look to cross cancel here. And if I do that, remember, I'm going to show it this way. I'm going to say those cross cancel. 5 goes into 5 once. 5 goes into 45 9 times. So now 2 times 9 is 18. Let's do another one. 5/7 times -28 over 1. These are going to reduce. 7 goes into 7 once. 7 goes into -28, -4 times. And then multiply across the top. Multiply by that numerator. -4 times 5, negative 20. Let's keep going. 2/3, this should say of 27 over 1. These are going to reduce. 3 goes into 3 once. 3 goes into 27 9 times. So I'm dividing by this denominator as I reduce it, and then 9 times 2 times the numerator, and I get 18. Okay, I'll do one more, and you can finish up a couple more as practice, and then we'll go on to the next page. Okay, so stack your fraction up, multiplication, negative 32 can go over 1. Then you're looking for what cross cancels, the 8 and the 32, right? So 32 divided by 8 is negative 4. And now multiply across the top. 3 times negative 4 is negative 12. I want you to pick 3. Pick 3 more to do on your own, and then I'll put the answers up in a second after you pause. But do any 3 and make sure you get 3 right before you move on. Okay, here's the next 2. If you did these, I reduced and got 5. 3 times 5 is 15. I reduced here and got 8. 5 times 8 is 40. I reduced here, careful, now I actually have a negative 9. 3 times negative 9 is negative 27. Or if you did the last 2, I'll leave those up for a second, check those. This is just basic multiplying fractions because we're going to use this strategy now as we go on to the next page. So as long as you got 3 of these right, awesome. Let's move on. Okay, let's look at some equations where I have fractions that I need to cancel out. I'm going to do one. If I look at this one, I need to cancel out that 3/8 or negative 3/8. So whenever we're multiplying, the inverse would be to divide. Well, if I divide this by 3/8, so 3 over negative 8 divided by itself to cancel it out, we know from when we covered fractions that when we divide fractions, we use keep, change, flip. So really to cancel this out, what I'd end up doing is multiplying by the reciprocal. Remember, if I flip a fraction over, that's called the reciprocal. So instead of showing a fraction divided by a fraction to cancel it out, I'm going to come over to the side and multiply by the reciprocal. And I'll show you when I do that, if I divide by 3 and multiply by 3, those cancel out. If I divide by negative 8 and multiply by negative 8, those cancel out. And I get the x by itself, which is exactly what I wanted. Whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other side. So I'm over here still multiplying by negative 8/3. And this is where that strategy comes in, right? 12 divided by 3 would be 4, and 4 times negative 8 is negative 32. Let's keep going. Draw your line down the equal sign. I'm trying to cancel out multiplying by 7/8. Well, to cancel that out, multiply by the reciprocal. 8 over 7. The 8 and the 8 and the 7 and the 7 all cancel. Bring down your x by itself. And whatever you did on one side, you have to do to the other side. And now I get to use my fun strategy. 21 divided by 7 is 3, and 3 times 8 is 24. I'll do 2 more and then you can finish these. Draw your line down the equal sign. Multiply by the reciprocal to cancel out the fraction. The 2 and the 2 and the 3 and the 3 all cancel. Bring down your x. Whatever you do on one side, you have to do on the other side. And then my fun little strategy says 12 divided by 2 is 6, and 6 times negative 3 is negative 18. Okay, last one for me. Line down the equal sign. Multiply by the reciprocal to cancel this fraction out. Because 5 and 5 cancel out, 6 and 6 cancel out. Bring down your x. And I need to, whatever I did on one side, I have to do on the other side. I need to multiply by 6 over 5 here. I know that negative 20 divided by 5 is negative 4, and negative 4 times 6 is negative 24. Okay? So I did those to show you. You have 4 more here to finish. Okay, this got bumped off the line up here, so cross this out, and it should be over here, but we're not going to worry about that too much. Just finish these 3. Do these 3. So multiply by the reciprocal, multiply by the reciprocal, multiply by the reciprocal, and then use our strategy to cancel those out and see what you get. Pause here. Play when you're ready. Okay, here's my reciprocal. 12 divided by 4 is 3. 3 times 5 is 15. Here I canceled out and got 5. 5 times 6 is 30. And here, negative 5 times 4 is negative 20. Don't worry about that question over here. Let's keep going. All right, so what if x has a negative in front of it? Well, we've already talked a little bit about how if there's nothing in front of a variable, we know there's an invisible 1. And if it's a negative x, then there's an invisible negative 1 right there with the x. Because the plus or minus sign always goes along with that number behind it. So this negative is attached to the x, but we can slide in that invisible 1. It's a negative 1 times x. Okay? Negative always goes with the number behind it or after it. All right, so to get rid of that negative, since this is a negative 1 times the x, I would divide both sides by that negative 1 to cancel it out. Here's what it's going to look like. Draw your line down the equal sign. This is really negative 1 times x. I can squeeze it in there. So to cancel out multiplying by negative 1, I'm going to divide by negative 1. And whatever I do on one side, I have to do on the other side. The negative 1's cancel out now. Bring down your x. And 7 divided by negative 1 is negative 7. Let's do another one. Draw your line down the equal sign. Slide that negative 1 in there. To cancel out multiplying by negative 1, I'm going to divide by negative 1 on both sides. Cross out what cancels. Bring down your x. Negative divided by a negative is positive 4. Let's try these. Get rid of the negative 14 first, right? The inverse of negative 14 or minus 14 here would be plus 14. So I'm going to do that first on both sides. Cross them out. But notice I still have negative x, so I'm not done. This is not isolated yet. It still has that negative 1 with it. And 7 plus 14 is 21. All right, slide that invisible negative 1 in there. So then I have to divide by negative 1 on both sides. And x is actually equal to negative 21. When you do your work, you should be plugging this back in and making sure it works. Double check your answer. All right, here, this one is a little tricky. How do I get rid of a positive 5? Well, minus 5 on both sides. But don't forget that negative is still glued to the x. I got to bring it down. I still have negative x here. And 2 minus 5 is negative 3. But I'm not finished. I've got to divide by that negative 1 on both sides. So now my negatives are gone, and x is equal to 3. Okay, so there are a few practice problems here. Just finish these 3 for right now in the video. Finish those 3, and we'll come back and look at the rest later as practice. But you need to have this page finished up. So pause when you're ready to check 1, 2, and 3 here at the bottom of this page. Okay, here I did times negative 4 on both sides. Here I did times 9 to cancel out the 9, but then I still had to divide by negative 1 on both sides. Here I did minus 8, and then also divide by negative 1 on both sides.